Zaralyn pressed her face against the cold metal wall and watched her ship disappear into the red sky. Her hands shook as she realized what had just happened. Her own team had left her here to die. The argument had started 3 days ago, when she found the truth in her research data. The corporation, paying for their expedition, wanted her to lie about what they had discovered on this moon. They wanted her to say the local creatures were harmless when they were actually very dangerous. They planned to send mining crews here, and those crews would die if they believed her false reports. "I will not change my data," she had told Captain Velkar. "Scientists must tell the truth." The captain's eyes had turned cold. "Then you are no longer useful to this mission." Now she stood alone on Kethvara, the most dangerous moon in this part of the galaxy. Everyone knew the stories about this place. Ships that landed here never returned. Creatures here could kill even the strongest warriors. The air itself was poison to most species. Zaralyn looked at the small device on her wrist that showed her suit's condition. The environmental suit that kept her alive was already having problems. A red warning light blinked steadily. She had maybe 3 days before it failed completely. 3 days to somehow escape from a moon that had killed thousands of explorers before her. She picked up her small pack of supplies and walked toward a group of ancient stone buildings nearby. These ruins were the only shelter she could see. No one knew who had built them or when, but they had stood here for centuries. Maybe they would keep her safe for a little while. The first building she entered was mostly empty. Strange symbols covered the walls, and dust lay thick on the floor. She found a room in the back corner and set down her pack. This would be her base for now. She pulled out her scanner and checked the air inside the ruins. It was still toxic, but her suit could handle it for now. Zaralyn sat down on a fallen stone block and tried to think clearly. Her people, the Velthari, were known throughout the galaxy for being smart and honorable. But her team had just proven that not all Velthari cared about honor anymore. Money and power mattered more to them than doing what was right. She opened her pack and counted her supplies. 1 water recycler, already showing yellow warning lights. Food bars for maybe 5 days if she was careful. Emergency medical supplies, a small plasma cutter that might work as a weapon, though she had never used it for fighting, and her research equipment, which was useless now since no one wanted her honest findings. The temperature control in her suit made a grinding noise, and then went quiet. She felt the air inside her helmet get warmer. Another system failing. At this rate, she would die from heat before the poisonous air got her. Through the broken walls of the ancient building, she could see the landscape of Kethvara. Red sand stretched in all directions, broken by sharp black rocks and patches of strange blue plants that moved even when there was no wind. In the distance, she could see the dark shapes of mountains against the bloody sky. This moon orbited a gas giant, so the days and nights here were strange. Sometimes the giant planet blocked out the sun for hours, making everything dark and cold. Other times, reflected light from the gas giant made everything glow with an eerie orange light. Right now, both the sun and the reflected light hit the surface, making the temperature climb steadily. Zaralyn activated her suit's communication system and tried to send a distress signal. She knew it was hopeless. Her team had taken her long-range transmitter. The suit's weak emergency beacon might reach nearby ships, but who would come to Kethvara to rescue one abandoned scientist? She recorded a message anyway. "This is Zaralyn of the research vessel Windrunner. I have been abandoned on Kethvara with minimal supplies. My environmental suit is failing. If anyone receives this, please know that the data about this moon's ecosystem is accurate. The creatures here are extremely dangerous. Do not let the Velthari Corporation send mining teams here based on false information." She paused, then added, "To my family on Veltara Prime, I am sorry I could not return home. I hope you understand that I had to choose truth over safety. Perhaps that makes me foolish, but I could not live with myself if I had lied and others died because of it." The message was sent into space, though she knew it would probably never reach anyone who cared. As the day wore on, Zaralyn explored more of the ruins. The buildings were connected by underground tunnels, which might be useful if she needed to hide or move without being seen from above. She found rooms filled with broken machinery that she could not identify. Some rooms had pools of clear liquid that her scanner said was actually pure water. That was one piece of good luck. She also found evidence that she was not the first person to take shelter here. Scattered around the ruins were pieces of equipment from different species. A Thraxian energy cell, completely drained. Fragments of a Corvan survival suit. Empty food containers from at least 6 different civilizations. All left by other people who had been stranded here and tried to survive. None of those other survivors had made it. She was walking through what was basically a graveyard. As the sun began to set and the gas giant's glow grew stronger, Zaralyn heard something that made her blood freeze. A low, echoing call came from somewhere outside the ruins. Then another call answered it from a different direction. And another. She had read about the creatures that lived on Kethvara, but hearing them was different from reading about them. The sounds they made were not like any animal she knew. They were intelligent sounds, like a language she could not understand. Zaralyn quickly moved deeper into the ruins and found a small room with only one entrance. She turned off all the lights on her equipment and sat in the darkness, listening. The calls continued outside, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away. She was no longer alone on this moon. Something was hunting. Zaralyn woke up to the sound of scraping metal. Something was moving around outside the ruins. She held her breath and listened carefully through the walls of her hiding place. The scraping sound came again. Closer this time. Then she heard a new sound that made her heart race. It was like clicking, but with a rhythm to it. Almost like someone tapping out a code. The creatures were communicating with each other. She checked her suit's display. The numbers were all wrong. Oxygen recycling at 60%. Water system completely failed during the night. Temperature control making strange noises. She had been asleep for 6 hours, and in that time her suit had gotten much worse. Zaralyn carefully moved to a crack in the wall where she could see outside. What she saw made her want to scream. 3 enormous creatures stood in the open area between the buildings. They looked like insects, but they were the size of small vehicles. Each one was at least 12 feet tall, with 6 legs that ended in sharp claws. Their bodies were covered in black plates that looked like armor. But the worst part was their heads. They had large eyes that moved independently of each other, and mandibles that clicked constantly as they communicated. These had to be the Raveners that every spacer talked about in whispers. She had read about them in research files, but seeing them was completely different. The files had not mentioned how they moved with purpose, like they were thinking and planning. One of the creatures walked directly to the building where she was hiding. It put its head close to the wall and made a long, low humming sound. Zaralyn realized it was somehow sensing her through the stone. Maybe it could smell her, or hear her heartbeat, or detect the energy from her suit. She moved as quietly as she could toward the back of the room. There was a tunnel entrance there that led deeper into the ruins. But as she stepped toward it, her foot hit a loose stone. The small sound echoed in the chamber. All 3 creatures outside went silent. Zaralyn did not wait to see what they would do next. She ran into the tunnel as fast as she could. Behind her, she heard the sound of claws scraping on stone as the creatures rushed toward the building. The tunnel was dark and narrow. Her suit's emergency lights cast strange shadows on the walls as she ran. The ancient symbols carved into the stone seemed to move in the flickering light. She could hear the creatures behind her, making those clicking sounds more rapidly now. They were excited. They were hunting. The tunnel split into 3 directions. Zaralyn chose the middle path without thinking. She just wanted to get as far away as possible, but after running for several minutes, she realized she had made a mistake. The tunnel was leading her down, deeper underground, and she could not hear the creatures anymore. She stopped running and tried to listen. The silence was almost worse than the sounds of pursuit. Were they gone? Or were they just being quiet? Raveners were supposed to be very smart. Maybe they were setting a trap. Her suit beeped softly, and she looked at the display. Oxygen recycling had dropped to 40%. At this rate, she would start having trouble breathing in a few hours, and she was completely lost in these ancient tunnels. Zaralyn tried to retrace her steps, but the tunnels all looked the same in the dark. Every passage was carved from the same gray stone, with the same mysterious symbols on the walls. After 20 minutes of walking, she was sure she was going in circles. Then she heard the clicking sounds again. They were coming from somewhere ahead of her. The creatures had somehow gotten in front of her. She turned around and ran back the way she had come. But now she heard clicking sounds behind her too. The Raveners had split up and surrounded her in the tunnels. They were working together like a team. Panic made her run faster than she thought possible. Her breathing became heavy, which made her suit work even harder to provide clean air. She could hear the oxygen recycling system struggling to keep up. But she could not slow down. The clicking sounds were getting closer from both directions. She saw an opening in the tunnel wall and threw herself through it without looking. She landed hard on a stone floor in a new chamber. Pain shot through her left leg as she hit the ground. When she tried to stand up, the leg would not support her weight properly. Zara Lynn looked around the new room. It was much larger than where she had been hiding before. Ancient machines, covered in dust, filled most of the space. Some of them were still humming softly, like they had power after all these years. But there was only one way in or out of the room, and she had just come through it. She was trapped. The clicking sounds grew louder outside the chamber. She could hear claws scraping on stone as the creatures moved through the tunnels. They knew where she was. They were just taking their time now. Zara Lynn dragged herself behind one of the large machines and checked her supplies. The plasma cutter was still working, though its power cell was only half full. She had never used it as a weapon, but she would have to learn quickly. She also had a few emergency flares that might confuse the creatures for a moment. Her leg throbbed with pain, and she could see that her suit had torn when she fell. The tear was not large enough to let the poisonous air in, but it weakened the suit even more. Everything was falling apart. She activated her suit's communication system one more time and recorded another message. Her voice was shaky, but she tried to sound calm. "This is Zara Lynn. I am trapped in the ruins on Kethvara. The Raveners are hunting me. They are much more intelligent than our records indicated. They work together and set traps. If anyone finds this message, warn other ships to stay away from this moon. The danger here is greater than we knew." She paused, listening to the clicking sounds getting closer. "I do not think I will survive this. But I want people to know that I tried to do what was right. I tried to tell the truth, even when it would have been easier to lie." The clicking sounds stopped. Zara Lynn held her breath and gripped the plasma cutter tightly. The silence stretched on for long minutes. Then, slowly, she saw a shadow move across the entrance to the chamber. One of the Raveners had found her. The Ravener stepped into the chamber slowly, its large eyes moving to scan every corner. Zara Lynn pressed herself deeper behind the ancient machine and tried not to breathe too loudly. The creature was even more terrifying up close. Its black armor plates looked thick enough to stop most weapons, and she could see drops of green liquid dripping from its mandibles. Acid, she realized. Their saliva was acidic. The creature made soft clicking sounds, like it was talking to itself, or maybe it was calling to the others. Zara Lynn gripped her plasma cutter and tried to decide when to make her move. She would only get one chance, and the small weapon might not even hurt something this big. The Ravener moved closer to her hiding place. She could smell it now. A sharp chemical odor that made her eyes water. 5 more steps and it would see her. 4 steps. 3. Then she heard something impossible. The sound of an explosion echoed through the tunnels from somewhere above. The Ravener's head snapped up, and it made an angry hissing sound. A second explosion followed the first, then a third. The creature quickly left the chamber, moving toward the tunnel that led back to the surface. Zara Lynn heard its claws clicking on stone as it ran. The sounds faded, leaving her alone in the darkness. She waited for several minutes before moving. What could be causing explosions on this dead moon? There were no active volcanoes here, and no other ships were supposed to be in this system. Maybe her team had come back for her, but that seemed impossible after they had tried so hard to get rid of her. Another explosion sounded, closer this time. Then she heard something that made her heart stop. Gunfire. Not the clean energy weapons that most civilizations used, but the loud, rough sound of primitive projectile weapons. And mixed in with the gunfire, she heard something even more strange. Someone was shouting in a language she did not recognize, but the tone was clear. It was the sound of someone fighting. Someone who was angry and determined and not afraid. Zara Lynn made a decision. Whatever was happening up there, it had to be better than waiting here to die. She dragged herself out from behind the machine, testing her injured leg. It hurt, but she could walk on it. She made her way back through the tunnels, following the sounds of battle. The explosions and gunfire continued, and she could hear the Raveners making new sounds now. Not the organized clicking from before, but angry screeches and roars. Whatever they were fighting, it was hurting them. When she reached the surface level of the ruins, she could see flashes of light through the broken walls. She found a window that looked out onto the main courtyard and carefully peered through it. What she saw made no sense at first. A figure in a bulky environmental suit was running between the ancient buildings, carrying what looked like a primitive rifle. The person was much smaller than a Ravener, but they moved with purpose and speed. Behind them, 3 of the giant creatures gave chase, but they seemed confused and angry rather than organized. The person in the suit suddenly stopped running and turned around. They raised their rifle and fired several shots at the closest Ravener. The bullets hit the creature's armor and sparked off, not doing much damage. But that was not the point. The person was leading the creatures towards something. Zara Lynn watched as the person jumped over a low wall and kept running. The 3 Raveners followed, moving in a tight group. When they were all in the right position, the person pulled something from their belt and threw it behind them. The explosion was much larger than the previous ones. All 3 Raveners were caught in the blast, and their screeches of pain echoed across the ruins. 2 of them were thrown to the ground and did not get back up. The 3rd was injured but still alive, thrashing around and making angry sounds. The person in the suit walked calmly toward the injured creature and shot it several times with their rifle. This time they aimed for spots where the armor plates did not cover completely. Green blood splattered on the ancient stones, and the Ravener finally stopped moving. Zara Lynn stared at the scene in shock. In less than 10 minutes, this stranger had killed 3 Raveners using tactics she had never seen before. They had used the creature's own hunting instincts against them, leading them into a trap. It was brilliant and dangerous and completely insane. The person stood in the courtyard for a moment, looking around to make sure no more creatures were coming. Then they activated some kind of scanner and slowly turned in a circle. When the scanner pointed toward Zara Lynn's building, it made a beeping sound. "Hello," the person called out in accented but understandable galactic standard. The voice was rough and tired, but also somehow warm. "I'm tracking a distress beacon. Is someone out there?" Zara Lynn hesitated. She had never seen fighting techniques like the ones this stranger had used. Most civilizations would consider such tactics primitive and brutal. But they had worked when her advanced plasma cutter would probably have been useless. "I am here," she called back, her voice weak from dehydration and fear. "Stay where you are," the stranger said. "I'm coming to you." "Are you injured?" "My leg is hurt, and my environmental suit is failing," she replied. "Understood. I'll be right there." A few minutes later, the person appeared in the doorway of her hiding place. Up close, she could see that their suit was different from anything she recognized. It was bulky and primitive-looking, with manual controls and physical gauges instead of advanced displays. But it was also clearly well-maintained and functional. The person removed their helmet, revealing a human face. Zara Lynn had seen humans before, but always at formal diplomatic meetings. They were a new species in galactic politics. Barely 200 years since they had achieved faster-than-light travel. Most older civilizations considered them violent and unpredictable. The human was male, with dark hair and kind eyes. His face was marked with small scars, and he looked older than most humans she had met. But his expression was gentle as he knelt beside her. "I'm Marcus Chen," he said, "and you look like you've had a really bad day." Despite everything, Zara Lynn almost smiled at his casual tone. "I am Zara Lynn. My research team abandoned me here 2 days ago." Marcus's expression darkened. "They left you on Keth Vera?" That's He shook his head and pulled medical supplies from his pack. We'll talk about that later. Right now, let's get you patched up and somewhere safer. As he carefully examined her injured leg, Zara Lynn studied his face. She had been taught that humans were dangerous because they were unpredictable. But this human had risked his life to save her, someone he had never met before, and he was treating her injuries with surprising gentleness. "Why did you come here?" she asked. Marcus looked up from his medical work. "Picked up your distress beacon yesterday. Took me a while to break orbit and get down here safely." He paused. Most species would have considered the risk too high for one person. But not humans? Marcus smiled. And it was not the dangerous expression she had expected. It was warm and determined. "We have a saying. Leave no one behind. Doesn't matter if you're human or not. Nobody deserves to die alone on a rock like this." For the first time in days, Zara Lynn felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Marcus finished wrapping Zara Lynn's injured leg with medical tape from his pack. His hands were steady and careful, not at all what she expected from someone who had just blown up 3 giant monsters. "That should hold for now," he said, sitting back on his heels. "The bone is not broken, just bruised, but you need to stay off it as much as possible." "Thank you," Zara Lynn said. She looked at the medical supplies he had used. "But you should save these for yourself. You will need them more than I do." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Why would I need them more?" Quote, "Because I am probably going to die anyway. My suit is failing, and I do not have much time left. You should not waste your resources on someone who cannot be saved." The human stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head firmly. "That's not how this works. We're both getting off this rock, or neither of us is. I don't leave people behind." Zara Lynn did not understand. "But that makes no sense. If you share your supplies with me, you might die too. The logical thing is to let me die and save yourself." "Logic," Marcus said, and there was something sad in his voice. "Yeah, I've heard that argument before, usually from species that think they're smarter than everyone else." He started packing his medical kit. "Tell me about your research team. Why did they really leave you here?" She explained about the false data and the corporate pressure to lie about the dangers of Kethvara. Marcus listened without interrupting. But she could see his jaw getting tighter as she talked. "So they wanted you to lie so that miners would come here and get killed by those things," he said when she finished. "It would have been profitable for the corporation," Zara Lynn said, "and my team would have been paid very well for their cooperation. And when you refused to go along with it, they decided you were a problem that needed to disappear." Yes, it was the logical choice for them. Marcus was quiet for a moment, checking his equipment. "You keep using that word. Logic. Where I come from, we call that something else. What do you call it?" "Evil." The word hit Zara Lynn like a physical blow. In all her education, no one had ever suggested that logical decisions could be evil. Difficult, perhaps. Unfortunate. But evil was something that came from ignorance or emotion, not from careful reasoning. "I do not understand," she said. Marcus looked at her directly. "Your team was willing to let innocent people die so they could make money. They abandoned you on a death world because you wanted to tell the truth. How is any of that logical?" Lon read, "Eska. Because it served their interests. The greatest good for the greatest number. My life, and the lives of some miners, are worth less than the prosperity that mining this moon could bring to my people." "Greatest good for who?" Marcus asked. "Your corporate bosses? Because I guarantee you, the miners who would die here wouldn't agree with that math." Zara Lynn tried to think of a response, but the human's words had shaken something loose in her mind. She had been taught that individual sacrifice for the greater good was the highest virtue. But who decided what the greater good was, and who decided which individuals had to be sacrificed? Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the ruins. "Can I ask you something? Back on your home world, do you have families? People you love?" "Of course. And if someone told you that killing your family would bring prosperity to 1 million strangers, would you do it? That is different. How? Zara Lynn opened her mouth to explain, then stopped. How was it different? If the logic of sacrifice for the greater good was correct, then no one should be exempt from it. But the thought of her family being killed for economic reasons made her feel sick. You are confusing me, she said quietly. Marcus turned back to her, and his expression was gentle again. I'm not trying to confuse you. I'm trying to show you that the logic you were taught is broken. Real logic would say that you don't build prosperity on the bodies of innocent people. He sat down across from her and pulled out food and water from his pack. Without being asked, he divided everything exactly in half and handed her share to her. Why are you doing that? She asked. Because you need food and water to live. But if you give me half, you will have less for yourself. That reduces your own chances of survival. Own chances. They seem case. They will seem preview hard. They will seem preview hard. They will seem preview hard. Own chances. Marcus smiled. Yeah, it does. But it increases your chances. And 2 people working together have a better shot at getting out of here than 1 person working alone. Even if one of those people is injured and will slow you down? Even then, Zara Lynn ate slowly, thinking about what the human had said. Her people had a strong tradition of logical thinking, but she was beginning to wonder if their logic was missing something important. Marcus's willingness to share resources with her was mathematically inefficient, but it felt right in a way that pure efficiency never had. Tell me about your people, she said. How did you learn to think this way? Marcus took a drink of water before answering. We learned the hard way. Humans spent thousands of years making the same mistakes your people are making now. We had wars, slavery, genocide, all justified by logic and the greater good. Millions of people died because someone decided their lives were worth less than other people's profits or power. What changed? We realized that the moment you start deciding some people are worth less than others, you've lost your soul. It doesn't matter how you justify it. Math, logic, efficiency, the greater good. It's all just excuses for treating people like objects. Zara Lynn thought about her team and how easily they had decided she was expendable. She thought about the miners who would die if false data was published. Were they all just objects to be used and discarded when convenient? So what do humans do instead? She asked. We try to value every individual life. It's messy and inefficient, and it doesn't always work perfectly. But it's better than the alternative. Marcus checked his watch. My ship will be back in 2 days. We just need to stay alive until then. 2 days, Zara Lynn repeated. Will your people be angry that you risked a ship and crew to save 1 alien? Marcus looked surprised by the question. Angry? No. They'll probably want to hear the whole story. Humans love rescue stories. Makes us feel like we're doing something right for a change. Over the next few hours, as they took turns keeping watch and resting, Zara Lynn found herself asking Marcus more questions about human culture. She learned about their concept of individual rights, about their belief that every person had inherent worth, regardless of their usefulness to society. It was completely different from everything she had been taught. But it explained why Marcus was willing to risk his life for a stranger. She also told him more about Velthari society, about the pressure to conform to logical decision-making, and the way dissenting voices were gradually eliminated. Marcus listened with growing concern, especially when she described how scientists who published inconvenient results often found themselves assigned to dangerous missions on remote worlds. Sounds like your people have built a system for getting rid of anyone who asks uncomfortable questions, he said. It maintains order and efficiency. It maintains power for the people at the top, Marcus corrected. And it turns everyone else into tools. As the day wore on, Zara Lynn found herself thinking less about the logical arguments she had been taught, and more about how those arguments felt when applied to her own life. Being abandoned by her team had been logical from their perspective, but it was also cruel and wrong. Marcus's willingness to help her was mathematically inefficient, but it was also kind and right. Maybe, she thought, there was more to right and wrong than simple mathematics. Outside, the alien sun set behind the gas giant, and the ruins filled with shadows. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, but for the first time in days, Zaralyn was not facing them alone. The human rescue ship appeared in the red sky exactly when Marcus had promised it would. Zaralyn watched through the ruins' broken walls as the small vessel descended carefully, its pilot taking time to scan for threats before landing. "That's Captain Rodriguez," Marcus said, checking his equipment one last time. "She's been flying rescue missions longer than I've been breathing. If anyone can get us out of here safely, it's her." 2 more humans emerged from the ship wearing environmental suits similar to Marcus's. They moved with the same purposeful efficiency that Marcus had shown. But Zaralyn could see them scanning the area nervously. Even experienced human pilots respected the dangers of Kethvara. "Marcus," one of them called out, "you look like hell, but you're alive. That's what matters." "Good to see you too, Santos," Marcus replied. He helped Zaralyn to her feet, supporting her weight when her injured leg protested. "We need to move fast. There might be more of those things around." The other human, a woman with gray hair and steady eyes, approached them. This had to be Captain Rodriguez. She looked at Zaralyn with curiosity but no suspicion or hostility. "You must be the scientist we came to rescue," she said. "I'm Captain Elena Rodriguez. We're going to get you home." "I am Zaralyn," she replied. "And I am grateful for your help. But I am not sure where home is anymore." The captain's expression softened with understanding. "We can talk about that once we're off this rock. Right now, let's focus on getting everyone back to the ship in one piece." The journey to the rescue ship was tense but uneventful. Santos and Rodriguez kept their weapons ready, while Marcus helped Zaralyn walk. Her environmental suit was making increasingly alarming noises, but it held together long enough to get her to safety. Once they were aboard the ship and lifting off from Kethvara's surface, Zaralyn felt a relief so strong it made her dizzy. She was alive. After days of expecting to die on that hostile moon, she was actually going to survive. Captain Rodriguez gave her a clean environmental suit and showed her to a small cabin where she could rest. "We'll reach our base station in about 6 hours, the captain said. "The medical team there can take a proper look at that leg." "What will happen to me then?" Zaralyn asked. "That depends on what you want to happen. Marcus told me about your situation. About how your own people abandoned you." The captain's voice was calm, but Zaralyn could hear anger underneath it. "As far as I'm concerned, you're welcome to stay with us as long as you need to figure things out. Even though I am not human, especially because you're not human. We need more people in this galaxy who care about doing the right thing, regardless of what species they are." During the flight to the human base, Zaralyn had time to think about everything that had happened. Marcus had shown her a completely different way of looking at the universe, one where individual lives mattered more than abstract calculations. The other humans on the ship treated her the same way, with respect and kindness that had nothing to do with her usefulness to them. When they reached the base station, she was surprised by how many different species she saw working alongside the humans. There were Corvin engineers, Thraxian doctors, and even a few Velthari, who had apparently chosen to leave their own people behind. "How is this possible?" she asked Marcus as they walked through the station's corridors. "I thought humans were isolationists." "Some humans are," Marcus admitted, "but others believe that the galaxy works better when people cooperate instead of competing. We're trying to build something new here. A community based on shared values rather than shared DNA." Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's chief medical officer, examined Zaralyn's leg and declared it would heal completely with proper treatment. But more importantly, she listened carefully to Zaralyn's story about the corporate corruption and the false data about Kethvara. "This is exactly the kind of thing we're trying to prevent," Dr. Kim said. "Information like yours could save hundreds of lives. Would you be willing to work with our research division to make sure the truth gets out?" Zaralyn looked around the medical bay, at the humans and aliens working together with obvious respect for each other. "Yes," she said. "I would like that very much." Over the following weeks, Zaralyn worked with the human research team to compile a comprehensive report on Kethvara's ecosystem and the Ravener threat. Her data, combined with Marcus's tactical observations, created the most complete picture anyone had ever assembled of the moon's dangers. But more than that, she began to understand what Marcus had been trying to tell her about human values. She watched humans risk their own safety to help strangers. She saw them share resources freely with anyone who needed them. She observed how they made decisions by consulting everyone involved, rather than simply following orders from above. It was inefficient in many ways. Human meetings took much longer than Velthari planning sessions because everyone was allowed to voice their opinions. Human supply distribution was mathematically suboptimal because they prioritized need over productivity. Human rescue policies were expensive and dangerous because they refused to abandon anyone, regardless of the cost. But it worked. The human community was growing, attracting people from dozens of species who were tired of being treated as expendable resources. Scientists who had been silenced by their own governments found their voices again. Workers who had been exploited by corporate interests found fair treatment. Outcasts and dissidents found acceptance. Zara Lynn made her decision 3 months after her rescue. She formally requested permission to join the Human Colonial Research Division as their first non-human department head. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked her the day before the ceremony. "Your own people will consider you a traitor. You can never go back to the way things were." Crating, Zara Lynn smiled. "Good. The way things were almost got me killed for telling the truth. I would rather be a traitor to a corrupt system than a loyal servant to it." The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Captain Rodriguez administered the oath, welcoming Zara Lynn as a full member of the human research community. Representatives from a dozen other species attended, many of them former refugees who had found new homes among the humans. As Zara Lynn spoke her oath to pursue truth and protect life regardless of species or economic considerations, she thought about the ancient ruins on Kethvara. Those buildings had been built by some long-extinct civilization, and no one knew why that civilization had vanished. But she suspected it was the same reason her own people were slowly destroying themselves. They had forgotten that individuals mattered more than systems. Humans had remembered something that the galaxy had lost. They had remembered that every life had value, that cooperation was stronger than competition, that kindness was more important than efficiency. After the ceremony, Zara Lynn and Marcus stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Several human ships were preparing to depart on exploration missions, each crew including multiple species working together as equals. "Do you think it will work?" Zara Lynn asked. "This dream of yours to change how the galaxy operates?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the ships disappear into hyperspace. "Maybe not in our lifetimes," he said finally. "But every person we help, every life we save, every truth we preserve, it all adds up. Change happens one individual at a time. One individual at a time," Zara Lynn repeated. She thought about her old team, probably still serving the corporation that had tried to silence her. Maybe someday they would understand what they had lost when they chose profit over principle. Maybe someday the entire galaxy would understand. But for now, it was enough that she had found her place among people who valued her, not for what she could produce, but for who she chose to be. She had been abandoned to perish among monsters, but the real monsters had not been the creatures on Kethvara. They had been the callousness and cruelty of a galaxy that had forgotten its soul. Marcus had shown her that there was another way. Humanity had shown her that cooperation, kindness, and respect for individual life were not weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be celebrated. The stars shone brightly outside the observation deck, each one representing countless worlds and countless lives. Some of those lives would be helped by the work she and Marcus and thousands of others were doing. Some would be saved by humans who refused to leave anyone behind. It was a good start, and for the first time in her life, Zara Lynn had hope that the future would be better than the past.